Guys, welcome back to the channel. A song that comes into my mind that perfectly describes our society. I think of the song by Pink Floyd, Comfortably Numb. Comfortably Numb is probably one of the greatest songs in the last 50 years, especially by David Gilmour's guitar solo, one of the greatest ever. But I think that title alone, Comfortably Numb, perfectly represents our society today. I think we comfortably numb ourselves by addictions, video game, pornography, by relationships that we shouldn't be in. I think most of us were afraid to confront those uncomfortable realizations, those uncomfortable truths of our lives, the absurdity of our lives, the sufferings of our life we don't want to confront. So we chase after the status, we chase after the job, the money, the women, or things like that, and chasing after a attractive spouse. But without us realizing it, we are being programmed. We are being programmed by our Western culture society. What the image of success and happiness looks like, right? You hear it many times. You hear people have everything and they're still miserable because they're looking at the wrong things. They're looking at the external things, not the internal things. So this is what I like to discuss today. And the next topic will be talking about 3 experiments I think will expose our human nature, our human conditioning, or why we act the way we do. Mojo. Experiment to discuss is named Pavlov classic conditioning. This experiment occurred during the 20th century. And basically what the psychologist did was the subject was a dog. He had a light. It was green or red. And he also included a bell. And every time the bell rung and the light turned green, the dog knew to go eat. But times when the light was red, but the bell would ring, the dog knew to not chase the reward, but the dog still salivated. Why I'm telling you this experiment? Because it showed us that human condition, we could be taught emotional responses automatically without us thinking why we're doing something, right? For the dog, it was an automatic response. He knew right away that he'd be rewarded. So this reminded me kind of like our culture nowadays, by our status, job, growing up as children, going to school. We're just being conditioned, going to school every day, having the same schedule, having the same conversations, same teachers, and it's been no different as you gotten older. You go to college, same classes, and then you go to the workforce, and same exact thing. Your boss is your teacher, and you're just listening to what your boss tells you, right? Out of fear, right? And I thought that experiment really exemplified how humans could be emotionally controlled and how they could respond in the way that others want them to respond. Next experiment I like to discuss about is named Milgram experiment. Milgram was a psychologist, a Yale psychologist who did an experiment back in 1961. The experiment was discussing about obedience, how far people were willing to go if an authority figure gave them a request, and how far would that person practice their obedience, even though they knew someone was being harmed. So in the experiment, Milgram would request for the subject, a person, to go maximum volt, and on the other side there was a man screaming for help, like, oh, don't do it, please, no, stop. And the person would most likely turn up all the way to 450 volt maximum, knowing it was harming the other person, but the person kept listening to the authority figure, and the person kept staying obedient. There was a disturbing number that actually obeyed to the authority figure. 65% of the participants listened and went max volt. I think this speaks volumes. This exemplifies, this really shows you how human conditioning could be taken too far. You know, we could be obedient in our society by debt. That's how we stay obedient to the systems, through debt, through status, through jobs, through being, buying things that we don't need, right? And working jobs that we don't like, but we buy things that we don't need so we impress other people that we don't even like. So if you think about that, I was like, wow, like we're living false lives, right? And a lot of people can't admit that. They don't want to admit that someone influenced their own thoughts. They want to believe that their thoughts is their own thoughts. But you have to question, for you to be aware, are your thoughts really your thoughts? Are your beliefs really your beliefs? Once you question that, then the truth will come out. You will realize the majority of your thoughts and beliefs weren't from you. It was from society. You were just obedient to the system. You're just being obedient to your boss. You don't like your job. You don't care about your bosses or employees or co-workers. But you're just being obedient, right? It's modern day shackles. And they get you in society where they make you believe you want to be in prison. They imprison you without you realizing you're in prison, right? They give you a false illusion of freedom, of liberation. It's like they give you, for example, 4 choices, right? And they tell you this 4 choices are only things available, not showing that there's trillion other choices behind that wall, but they only give you 4 choices. That's what they're doing. They're putting up front the choices that you can make, not giving you all the choices. Good, Mojo. My last experiment I had to discuss real quickly is named Ash Conformity Trial. In this trial, it had one subject who was an outsider, and the rest were part of the experiment. And they all, about a group of 10 men, will have a visual effect on the board of 3 lines, right? A, B, and C. One the longest, one the shortest, and one the medium. And what they did is, on purpose, the group would all pick the wrong answer on purpose. The people that were a part of the experiment. And the one subject that was an outsider, he would be thrown off. He would look around and he wasn't really too confident about his answer. Even though the answer was so obvious, what was the longest line? It would be B. But everyone picked A. So now then he felt obligated. He felt that it was important for him to be part of the group, and he would pick the wrong answer, knowing it was the wrong answer. It gave him self-doubt, right? And I thought that experiment, I was like, wow. Like right there, it can be more obvious how much we conform in our lives. We don't even realize how much we conform, right? Sometimes it's good to conform, like you need to wear proper clothes and work and things like that, but for the most part, people conform for the wrong reasons, and in other ways, they really sell their souls, right? They get in friendships, relationships that they don't really want to be in, but they don't want to be lonely, so it just feels comfortable to them at that moment. It's a lot better than being confronted by uncomfortable emotions and feelings, so they were like, I'd rather just be with that guy or girl, and they could distract me in the meantime. So I thought that experiment really pointing out our society, our conformity, how far are we willing to go against our intuition and our own beliefs and just ride along with someone else's belief because the whole group agreed with it, right? And what you find out is once you're against the group doesn't like that. Out of survival, they will push you out. You become an outsider. And a lot of people wouldn't like that. Being in solitude, being isolated from your group, from society, from your friends, because then you feel like you're invaluable to society. So most is why they conform. That's why most people conform, because out of survival, their brain tells them you need to be part of the tribe. You need to be part of the group. So I thought that experiment really showed the truth on how we copy each other, how in reality most of our thoughts, most of the actions that we take are not really our actions, but we conform to ideas and propaganda and ideologies that we far from even realize or even think about. A perfect quote I think about in the movie Fight Club, the character Tyler Durden, he discusses about how the more that you own, the more that it owns you. And how I took that was, right, the more you own, the more likely that you will be in debt, and the more likely that you won't be taking risks or being bold in life. And that's what society wants out of you. They want you to be predictable. They want you to take the predicted career path, the predicted relationships, so they can make the most profit out of you, right? And it's really dehumanizing. And if you see that society sees you as a profit, and they're just trying to squeeze as much money out of you, even up to death, you kind of just want to go your own way, because then you realize you're in this prison, and it's like, okay, at least I'm aware that I'm in prison. Let me escape from this algorithm. But most will protect anything of that prison because that's all they know. They don't want to know the outside. And a perfect story I think about is The Allegory of the Cave by Plato. And that book discusses that story. It shows a man who finally escapes a cave, right? And he goes out of the cave, and what does he experience for the first time? Light. What happens when your eyes haven't seen light in a long time? It gets blurry, it's uncomfortable, it's disorienting, and that's kind of how truth is. Once you experience truth, it's very disorienting. It will shake you to the core, but then your eyes will get immune to the light, and then eventually you want to go back and save the people that are still in prison. But soon you figure out the people that are in prison, they're happy where they are, right? They don't realize the potential that's out there. They just know what they know, and they're just comfortable. And you always hear that quote, ignorance is bliss, which it is to a certain point, but then I think eventually everyone in this lifetime will have a rude awakening, if now or at their deathbed, the potential that was out there and them not taking their own authentic path in life. Capitalism rewards productivity. I have an example of a lawyer I knew. He was making $130,000 a year, but he was working 60, 70 hours per week. And right there, it told me it kind of defeated the whole purpose of being a lawyer. It was like, okay, you're promised to make this much money, but then you're working 20, 30 hours, more hours per week than most people are. So it was like, what's the whole point of that? Then you're not living. You're working, you're identified with this job, and you think your job is your soul. And your soul doesn't come from your job, it comes from you. But that's what he was identified with. That's what he was conditioned as a child in his teen years. And that's what we see all the time, commercialized in YouTube, is hustle culture. Go after it, get after it. Because if you're not producing and making money for yourself, the culture, the society is not making money off you. That's how they make money, is for you to be productive. You need to be productive so they make more money because you're a profit for them. So the core message, what I'm trying to deliver in this message, is being self-aware, being self-reliant to yourself, not to society, not to other people. Don't expect others to fulfill you. Don't expect jobs, relationships, family. Expect that from yourself, right? At least if you're aware how capitalism works and how much they're trying to make profit out of you, that's okay. Like, at first, you will be in denial. Okay, that's always first human reaction is denial. And there's a grieving point to that. But once you go through past that phase, you start accepting it. It's like, okay, this is how it is. This is the part of the game, right? And being self-reliant, being okay being in solitude by yourself, not relying on others to make you fulfilled. Because you never face true liberation until you're okay being by yourself. And that's the truth. So I thought the experiment Pavlov really showed how we're conditioned, how our emotions are controlled in our society. Milgram, it shows how far we're willing to take our obedience. And also the Ash conformity trial, how much we don't realize we're conforming in our society. And I think these 3 experiments really help us be aware of our human conditioning and asking the right questions, right? Of, are these thoughts my thoughts? Are these beliefs my beliefs? You know, what do I want out of my life? What is life asking for me, right? What is asking for me, right? It's so when something happens, adversity, a trauma, or a suffering, you don't ask life why this is happening to me, because then that's victimhood. What I've learned is to ask yourself, what is life asking out of me? What is it asking from me, life? You know, what is life trying to make me take action of? Because once you ask that, then answers start coming into your head. And that's when you get truth. That's when you get authenticity. That's when you reach the individuation process, as Carl Jung says it. So, thank you for listening. See you next time.